lesson, let's go back to this beginning. Okay, lesson 7 and 8. And we're just talking about stress management and conflict resolution. So in our last lesson, I just wanted to just review what we talked about last week. We talked about how the respect we have for ourselves and for others affects our decisions we make in challenging situations. So having respect for others is critical when disagreements arise, and we need to be mindful of the best outcome for everyone involved. So that just gives us a little perspective as we move forward into what we call conflict resolution. So what is a conflict? So conflict is basically, we think of like arguments or yelling or screaming or, disagreeing in general. It's basically the technical definition is a conflict occurs when two or more people, could be 1-on-1, it could be 2-on-2, it could be 2-on-1, it could be a whole group against another group. So a conflict occurs when two or more people have opposing needs, principles, and interests. So that's the technical definition. You have to understand, even though we don't like conflict in our lives, it is a normal part of life. And actually, it's a part of healthy relationships. You would think that if you're, say, in love and you have like this great relationship that, you never fight. That's not true. There's always going to be conflict about something. It could be the little thing like who left the toothbrush, or the toothpaste cap off, the toothpaste, or it could be, something as, where, how are you spending your paycheck? Where is the money all going? There's varying degrees of conflict, as you'll see. And because people have different thoughts, ideas, and opinions, we often disagree. So by taking a respectful approach to conflict, we can prevent a confrontation from escalating into violence. Again, we're not going to say we're going to eliminate conflict. We're just going to prevent it from getting to a point where you can't come back from that. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is have your pen and pencil or paper handy, because I'm going to ask you to write down some of the ways that we deal with conflict. There are, I believe there are 6 ways. So healthy or unhealthy, different ways of dealing with conflict. Remember we talked about relationships and how sometimes they're healthy or sometimes they're unhealthy. Same with conflict. All right. So give you a situation, or an example. Both people talk out the problem to find an alternative that they both agree upon. So again, 2 people come together and they talk out something that they both can agree upon. So we call this a win-win. So I want you to write down in your notebooks, win-win. Both people, and I'll give you examples of situations where a win-win is possible. So both people talk out the problem to find an alternate that they both agree on. The next way of solving a conflict is one person must lose in order to win. So we call this a compete. So one person must lose in order to win. Okay. I'm into the Queen's Gambit, so I'm all about chess right now. So that's the reason why I chose the background. All right. Recognizing a potential conflict that could be dangerous or is not your business and choosing to stay away from it. So recognizing a potential conflict that could be dangerous or is none of your business and you choose to stay away from it. We call this a steer clear. Okay, so just being like, nope, not going near that, not going to touch it, not going towards it, I'm going to go this way instead of this way. Or I'm not going to go to that party because, you know, I don't know if there's going to be drugs or, you know, alcohol or something, you know, more, you know, dangerous there. I'm going to steer clear. I'm going to stay away from that. It works in many kinds of situations. Steer clear. Everybody wrote that down. All right. Next one is both people agree to give up a little, share or split the difference. So when we think about that, we think about compromise. So if you can write down compromise. So both people agree to give up a little or, you know, split the difference. Compromise. Okay. Next one is recognizing that getting your way isn't worth the risk of escalating the conflict. So this one is what we call don't sweat the small stuff. So recognizing that getting your way isn't worth the risk of escalating the conflict. We call that just, you know, just let it like brush off the shoulder. Like don't sweat it. Don't sweat the small stuff. And that could be in situations where it's like, you know, it's not that important to you, or you really don't care much about it. Maybe the other person cares more about it than you do. So you're just kind of like, you know what, I'll give it to her this time, or, you know, I'll let him have his way this time. Don't sweat the small stuff. All right. So this next one is choosing not to resolve a conflict when you know you should. And I could probably see, you know, probably a bunch of people would probably choose this option. I'm like, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to, hopefully it'll work itself out. And this one is called avoiding it. So write down, avoid it. Choosing not to resolve a conflict when you know you should. Just kind of trying to ignore it and be like, it's not, no, it's not my problem, or it is my problem, but I'm just gonna pretend it's not, and hopefully things will work out for the best. We'll see. All right, so as you guys can see by these ways of resolving conflict, there's healthy ways and there's unhealthy ways. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just think about some of the ways that are healthy, and next to your list, I'm going to ask you to put an H for the ones that you think are the healthy ways to resolve conflict, and I'm going to ask you to put a U in front of the ones that you think are the unhealthy ways. I'll give you a moment to do that. So which ones do you think are the healthy ways to approach conflict and the unhealthy? And my hint is there are more healthy ways than unhealthy ways. So, all right. So in the chat, if you guys want to start chatting, which ones do you think might be the healthy ways? I want to hear what you guys think. You've got, I think there are about 6 of them, I think. So we've got steer clear, we've got avoid it, compete. What do you guys think? What are some of the healthy ways? Oh, compromise, good. All right. Very good. So compromise is definitely a healthy way to deal with conflict. Anything else? Steer clear or walk away. Good, Adriana. Win-win, AC, good. I like the talking calmly, Yamina. I agree. In any situation, calmly talking is a definite way of cooling down a situation. So yes, awesome. So which ones do you guys think would be the unhealthy ways? I think there's about 2 that I would say would be like questionable. Avoiding it, good, good, awesome. Avoiding is one. Can you think of the second one? Competes. Good. AC, yes. and Yumina said, pinning the problem on the other person, blaming. That's also not a good one. Sweating the small stuff, it depends. It depends on the situation, because again, if it's really, really important to you, sweating, letting it go and being passive would never be a good way to resolve that conflict. Good job, guys. All right, so we've got a win-win, steer clear, compromise, don't sweat the small stuff. Those are definitely healthy ways to approach conflict. Unhealthy ones, unfortunately, are compete and avoid it. So let me show you what I mean when we think about conflict. I'm going to give you different scenarios, and you guys have your list in front of you, hopefully, so you'll be able to answer these questions. Situation number 1. The boss has just announced a staff meeting starting in 15 minutes. Theo and Violet will present their report, and they are nervous because there is not that much time to prepare. Theo wants Violet to do most of the speaking, and vice versa. They agree to share the roles equally. Theo will present the first half, and Violet will present the second half. So looking at your list, guys, and using the chat, or you can unmute. I can't really see everybody, but that's okay. What do you think this first scenario is describing? What do you think that Theo and Violet are doing? Good, Kayla, good. Melina, good. Yes, compromise. Good job, guys. Good job. Good, Aaliyah. Thank you so much. Compromise. So they're compromising, definitely. This is compromise. You do a little part, I do a little part. We share that responsibility. Great. It could have gotten ugly, but I think that, they worked it out where they were able to compromise that. All right. This is my favorite cookie, Girl Scout cookie of all time, Thin Mints. Some of you might disagree, but that's okay. All right, Viv and Jade are roommates. Jade ate the last of, Viv, it should have said Viv ate the last of Jade's Thin Mints. Even though these are her favorite cookies, Viv reminds herself that Jade always shares food. So Viv decided she was going to let it go. So Viv and Jade are roommates. She ate the last of their cookies. Viv says, you know what? Jade always does share. So what's Viv going to do? What's in the chat? Why don't you guys tell me what Viv did? And this is like, again, it's something that maybe was not such a huge deal when it comes to overall, scheme of things. But what do you think that she did? This one might be a little bit challenging. Yeah, good, Melina. Don't sweat the small stuff. Exactly. She didn't sweat it. She was just like, you know what? Walked away, not a big deal. She eats my food, I eat her food. I can get another box of cookies, no big deal. All right, next one. Ted politely asks his cousin Chuck to lower the volume of his music. Chuck refuses. The situation escalates, in which each cousin turns up the volume of their music louder and louder. A neighbor calls the police. So what do we think this is? So what do you think happened in this situation? Compete. Good, guys. Awesome. Yes, exactly. So there was a little competition going on between Chuck and Ted. Neighbors called. Not a good situation. So this is called compete. But my question is, what could be a few possible resolutions? What could have happened in this situation? Instead of them competing, what could they have done differently? I want to hear in the chat, or you can unmute, whatever you want to do. What could they have done differently? What would you have done if you were in that situation? And have you ever been in that situation? I'm just curious. There's definitely a compromise. Yes, Chuck could have just turned down his music. He could have. Or Chuck could have used maybe like headphones or something. What do you guys think? He could have still listened to it at the volume that he wanted to, but just not disturbing everyone around him. So that's definitely, you know, they chose to compete, but then they got consequences for that. All right, we're going with the next one. All right, this is a situation. Blake and his dad are at the high school football game. During halftime, they go to the concession stand and see some fans from the opposing team arguing. The conflict is quickly escalating, so Blake and his dad decide to watch the halftime show and to get some snacks later. So what do you think in this situation? What do you think Blake and his dad did? And this is a pretty smart move, I would say. Yes. All right. So Melina says steer clear. Good job. Yes. They definitely, you know, instead of getting into it and they could see that the, you know, situation is getting hot and intense, they just kind of like, they steered clear. They just avoided that whole situation. They didn't, you know, go to that area where they saw, you know, a possible incident happening, which is smart because most people would run to it to see if they can film it or they can get involved in some way, which is probably not a very smart decision at all. But they decided they were going to just avoid it and then go and get something later. So this is steer clear. All right. Marcus and Shauna's mom put them in charge of setting the table for holiday dinner. Marcus wants to use the red napkins and Shauna wants to use the blue napkins. They agree to use white napkins and make a centerpiece with red and blue candles. So in this situation, what did Marcus and Shauna do? There's not that many left. So what did they do? Yeah, so AC, very good. All right. They actually, they didn't, Hanasha, I know you would think that they compromised, which it sounds like a compromise because he didn't, you know, give a little. But there's a win-win. AC, good job. Yes, exactly. It was like they came up with something even better than what they could have initially. So it was like, first it was like they were going to argue, you know, I know it's silly arguing over red and blue napkins. Who does that? Sometimes it's important to that person. So they compromise. Well, yeah, not compromise. They win-win because they actually created something that they would never even thought of, and it made it even better with the centerpiece. So it's a win-win for everybody. All right, and the last one. You and your teammate always stop for a smoothie after practice. One day, your teammate forgot his money. You covered him because he said he would pay you back, but he hasn't paid you back yet. Whenever you remind him, he says, I'll get back to you later. So what's left? What do we have as far as, yes, avoiding it. Unfortunately, this is an avoid it kind of moment. So if we think about avoiding it, which is the unhealthy way of solving a conflict, what could you have done to resolve this conflict? Like if you were in that situation where your friend was just like, I'll get back to you, I'll get back to you later. You know, what could you say or do that could resolve the conflict? Because you're probably feeling some type of way about them, you know, borrowing money and not paying you back. Tikita, you said something like that happened to him a few months ago. Oh, wow. The same thing. That's so funny. Yeah. You don't want to avoid it because it's your money. And, you know, it's Adriana says it's all about communication. Definitely. So how would you communicate that? Like, how could you say, or what could you say, you know, in that way that would be assertive, not aggressive, of course, but assertive in saying like, listen, you know, I got you last time. How about you get me this time? So when you're at that smoothie shop, you'll be like, it's on you. It's your turn to pay. So at least, you know, maybe they'll take the hint that, you know, you're not a piggy bank. So Good job, guys. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about risk factors that could possibly increase a conflict. Always, when we think about things that happen, a crowd of people encouraging a fight, obviously that's a risk factor. We think about the people involved don't know or care about each other. And I want you to think about conflicts that happen in your lives, like in your, in your homes, maybe perhaps conflicts that happen in your community, conflicts that you've seen or witnessed at school. I know that we haven't been together in a while, so maybe perhaps the conflicts, maybe have decreased, but I know that there's a lot of mental health issues that are increasing. I know people are feeling, isolated and lonely, and also, there's also acting out, especially, in the streets, because of all of these, conflicting feelings that people are going through. So it doesn't help when the people that are involved don't care or don't know about it, don't care about each other. The person involved in a conflict is a known troublemaker. There is no responsible adult around. That could also increase the risk factor. Definitely weapons that are present or readily available increase the risk. And one or more people involved has been using drugs or drinking. So we think about all of these as increasing risk factors in making a conflict way, way more serious or even perhaps deadly. So think about all these when we think about increasing. So you actually can reduce a conflict just by your, as you guys mentioned in the chat, just by your attitude and maintaining a level head. So what goes up can come down. I think that people think that once it gets to that level, it's got to like continue. But what happens is that you can actually cool down and prevent conflict from even happening just by a few simple tips. And I'm going to give you some of these tips with Cool It. So ways to cool it, and you guys can actually, if you want to jot it down just for your own personal use, that's good too. But this is super interesting. When we think about cooling it, the first one is calling the person by their name. You would not believe how many conflicts can be reduced by saying, like, listen, John, like I don't want to get into it with you. Instead of, listen, I don't want to get into it with you. But using the person's name actually forms a connection, mentally. And then you're just like, oh, they know me. They have, even though they probably just know me by name, you don't have to know the person, be a best friend with them. But just using their name could cool down a conflict. Using a calm voice, not yelling, screaming, just kind of like using a monotone, tone of voice. Relaxing your body. You'd be surprised how your body language, when we talked about earlier, it's like you can tense up, like your fists can be like this, and you won't even you realize that you're just like, oh my God, where'd that happen? Just because our body is sensing tension and that anger buildup, we can, just relaxing your body, uncrossing your arms, taking, stretching, taking a step back, taking a breath. That's super important. Using words like let's, we, together, and our. That is so important. And just like, let's step back a minute, or we can work this out, or, let's come up with a plan. It's so important to use those connecting words instead of you, or, kind of like almost like a blame kind of thing. It's almost like we're in this together. Ask here another person's point of view. Like, I see it from this way, but tell me how you see it. Point of view is so important. Attacking the problem, not the person. Don't call, of course, you want to call the person a name, but you want to hold back on that and attacking the problem. Like I want to say, like, my son's room is a mess and he's, he's a sloppy person. But I'm not going to call him a slob, even though I really want to. I'm going to say, you know what? Let's, how can we work together to, make this room neater and tidy so that I don't walk on, trip over your shoes when I walk in your room constantly. Again, brainstorming. It's another way to come up with some ideas that you would never even have thought of. And the golden rule, I always live by the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated. I always think that's the best way of handling, interpersonal relationships, in conflict, is just like, I would treat you the way I would want to be treated. And I hope that you would do the same for me. So I'm going to play you guys a video. It's a little bit longer, but it is 14 effective ways to resolve conflict. Enjoy.
Brainy Dose presents 14 effective conflict resolution techniques. When we have a difference of opinion with somebody, we often try to correct them, to convince them that our point of view is correct and theirs is not. After all, we would never hold a point of view we thought is wrong. Yet, we all know from experience how difficult it is to get others to admit to being wrong. It is usually not only futile, it often leads to real conflict. Thankfully, there are a number of effective conflict resolution strategies, so consider giving them a try. Number 1, don't get defensive. In any conflict, whether it's professional or personal, we all feel the urge to rush to our defense. You may find yourself constantly trying to correct the other person's position with "but," "nevertheless," "however," in defense of your own position before they are even finished explaining their opinion. Try turning the situation around. How do you feel when another person is constantly contradicting you and seems unwilling to consider your opinion? Take a moment and really try to see things their way. They have reasons for their point of view, just as you do for yours. This doesn't mean that you have to accept their position, but if you let them know you are taking them seriously, you can avoid things getting personal. Try using phrases such as, "I understand what you mean," and "that's a valid point." Signal that you respect their opinion, even if you don't agree. Number 2, avoid the blame game. When you feel under attack and go on the offensive, even calling the other person's character or intelligence into question, you cannot really win. All you've done is made an enemy. Avoid blaming others. Instead, establish an atmosphere of respect, one in which everyone can safely express themselves. Let others state and explain their points of view without launching an attack. Number 3, listen actively. Perhaps the greatest way to resolve a conflict is by really listening. You want to express yourself, so let others express themselves. Instead of listening just to discover flaws and formulating counter-arguments while they are speaking, listen to what they have to say. You may discover that you didn't really understand the point the other person was actually making. You may discover common ground. In any case, they will respect you for listening. Number 4, begin statements with "I." When you begin statements with "you," it sounds like you are pointing a finger at the other person. This actually betrays a weakness on your part. Your opinion should stand on its own merits, not rely on another person's flaws. If you think that the other person is not allowing you to express yourself, just let them know how that affects you. "I feel like I'm not being understood" is far less confrontational than "you aren't listening." The first statement relates to yourself. The second one is directed at the other person and destined to put them on the defensive. This can make a big difference in a conversation. These kinds of I statements give the other person a chance to pause and rethink their own behavior. It can lead to an atmosphere of mutual respect. Number 5, tame your emotions. Speaking in anger or frustration is a bad strategy for resolving conflicts. When you're emotional, your rational thinking shuts down and you can't formulate an acceptable outcome. Don't unload your emotions on others. Wait until you calm down so that you can discuss things in a reasonable manner. Throw a tantrum if you want, but do it before you speak with them. When you are calm and rational, you can make your own points better, and you are open to different perspectives. Number 6, show that you can compromise. Depending on the situation, some approaches to conflict management may be more effective than others. Sometimes, simply being accommodating and avoiding conflict is the best move, especially if you don't care much, one way or the other. A competitive strategy might be much more useful when you have to come to some sort of decision and need to assert yourself. In most conflicts, however, the only way to come to some sort of resolution is through compromise. You have to come to some acceptable agreement in order to move forward. Show others that you don't always have to insist on your own way, even if you still think you are right. Others will appreciate you for putting a solution before your own pride. Number 7, don't badmouth someone to others. Unless you really need to, you should not spread around details of a conflict you are having with someone. You will only make them feel betrayed, and the only way they can defend themselves is by badmouthing you. This does not make you look good. There are other ways to vent anger or frustration than talking someone down. If you just have to do that, do it in front of a mirror, write it down, or talk to someone who doesn't know who you are talking about. Trust and respect are essential for resolving conflicts. Number 8, don't take it personally. We tend to regard our opinions or actions as a direct reflection of who we are, so we get defensive. However, when someone disagrees with your opinion or criticizes your performance, don't take it as an attack on you personally. Someone might think your opinion is flawed or your performance can stand improvement, but that does not mean they think you are a terrible person. They may even have a point. Realize that if you can distinguish between what they are criticizing and yourself as a person, it will become much easier to avoid personal conflict or resolve differences in a way that is acceptable to everyone concerned. Number 9, pay close attention to nonverbal communication. Dealing with conflicts directly is not everyone's forte. Some people prefer to be accommodating or even avoid conflict whenever possible. They are uneasy with conflict and would rather say or do almost anything just to spare themselves an unpleasant situation. This can lead to building emotional pressure. Since they are not being honest with you, you may not be aware of this until it comes to a head. So, don't just take people at their word. Be aware of nonverbal communication that betray emotions, such as body language, facial expressions, eye contact, and voice tonality. "I'm okay" should not be very convincing if they are sighing, averting their eyes, or fidgeting. If you learn to pay attention to these cues, you will sense when their words do not match their feelings. Then you can take steps to encourage them to be more honest with you. Number 10, prioritize resolving the conflict over being right. You might think that someone is being unfair to you or that something just isn't right. Maybe you regard yourself as the victim of a compromise, or perhaps of some change of policy at work. You can easily get frustrated and emotional about it. Usually, the situation is not just about you. Calm down and reassess things. The compromise or decision might have been made for the sake of the common good. Yes, you may indeed be right, but you should consider whether you really want to insist on your point of view at the cost of the conflict and resentment it may cause. Not every battle is worth fighting. Number 11, know when to apologize and forgive. Telling someone, "I'm sorry," can be very difficult. This is especially true when you feel like you have nothing to apologize for. And if someone has hurt you in some way but won't admit to the wrong, you may get so upset that you won't ever want to forgive them. Yet, you should consider that resolving a conflict is often preferable to maintaining your pride. People make mistakes, and just like you, might have a problem admitting to them. If you can put aside your resentment and forgive them, you could make way for an even better relationship with them. Resentment is a bad investment of time and energy. Number 12, focus on the present, not the past. When you are in a conflict with someone, it can begin to get personal. You may start to remember other conflicts you had with them in the past and get resentful. You might even bring them up in order to attack them, even though it may have nothing to do with the issue at hand. One way to avoid this is to use a 48-hour rule. If someone does or says something that bothers you, bring it up with them within 48 hours. If you don't, just let it go. Don't use past conflicts as a weapon when you are engaged in a new conflict. The other person will resent you for doing so, and it will just make it harder to come to a resolution. Number 13, use humor when appropriate. Humor is a great technique for dissolving tension. It's hard to be upset when you're laughing, right? But you must be careful. You should avoid humor that could offend your counterpart or makes fun of his or her position, or anything else that might be sensitive to them. Be aware of the other person's sense of humor. Some people can take a joke, but others can't. Use humor only as a way to break the tension and focus at least temporarily on something other than the subject of conflict. Self-deprecating humor, poking fun at yourself, is one method for achieving this. A well-timed humorous remark might be all that is needed to calm emotions and make all involved parties more receptive to a practical resolution. Number 14, remember the importance of the relationship. At a given moment, the topic of contention might seem to be extremely important. Conflicts, however, arise constantly and are almost always temporary in nature. Solutions are almost always discovered. Remember, relationships usually last, for good or ill. Insisting on your point of view is rarely worth the cost of losing a friend or worsening any relationship. After all, conflicts tend to fade, but people usually stick around. How will they regard you? Think about how important the subject of discussion is to you, compared to the relationship you have with your contender. Make sure you weigh the gains of winning against what they can cost. Maintaining good relationships will better enable you to resolve future conflicts. What do you think? How do you deal with conflict? Do you use any of these strategies? Share your thoughts and comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share with your friends so we can keep making them. For more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and remember to click on the notification bell. Also,
okay, so I hope you guys liked that video. I think that it really covered and highlighted all those points that we addressed. So we're going to move into our second piece, which is lesson, I think we're on lesson 8, which is stress management. And what is stress and how do we deal with it? So I'm just going to play you again this is a shorter video, and I thought this was so interesting because when we had talked about stress and trauma and impact on the our functioning, and it actually impacts our brain functioning. So super interesting. Give it for a couple minutes. Just please enjoy this video. How chronic stress affects your brain.
Are you sleeping restlessly, feeling irritable or moody, forgetting little things, and feeling overwhelmed and isolated? Don't worry, we've all been there. You're probably just stressed out. Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like when you're playing a competitive sport or have to speak in public. But when it's continuous, the kind most of us face day in and day out, it actually begins to change your brain. Chronic stress, like being overworked or having arguments at home, can affect brain size, its structure, and how it functions. right down to the level of your genes. Stress begins with something called the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal axis, a series of interactions between endocrine glands in the brain and on the kidney, which controls your body's reaction to stress. When your brain detects a stressful situation, your HPA axis is instantly activated and releases a hormone called cortisol, which primes your body for instant action. But high levels of cortisol over long periods of time wreak havoc on your brain. For example, chronic stress increases the activity level and number of neural connections in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. And as levels of cortisol rise, electric signals in your hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with learning, memories, and stress control, deteriorate. The hippocampus also inhibits the activity of the HPA axis, so when it weakens, so does your ability to control your stress. That's not all though. Cortisol can literally cause your brain to shrink in size. Too much of it results in the loss of synaptic connections between neurons and the shrinking of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates behaviors like concentration, decision-making, judgment, and social interaction. It also leads to fewer new brain cells being made in the hippocampus. This means chronic stress might make it harder for you to learn and remember things, and also set the stage for more serious mental problems like depression and eventually Alzheimer's disease. The effects of stress may filter right down to your brain's DNA. An experiment showed that the amount of nurturing a mother rat provides its newborn baby plays a part in determining how that baby responds to stress later in life. The pups of nurturing moms turned out less sensitive to stress because their brains developed more cortisol receptors, which stick to cortisol and dampen the stress response. The pups of negligent moms had the opposite outcome, and so became more sensitive to stress throughout life. These are considered epigenetic changes, meaning that they affect which genes are expressed without directly changing the genetic code. And these changes can be reversed if the moms are swapped. But there's a surprising result. The epigenetic changes caused by one single mother rat were passed down to many generations of rats after her. In other words, the results of these actions were inheritable. It's not all bad news though. There are many ways to reverse what cortisol does to your stressed brain. The most powerful weapons are exercise and meditation, which involves breathing deeply and being aware and focused on your surroundings. Both of these activities decrease your stress and increase the size of the hippocampus, thereby improving your memory. So don't feel defeated by the pressures of daily life. Get in control of your stress before it takes control of you.
Okay, so I would love to hear more about what you thought about these two videos. We'll continue on, and if we have some more time at the end, I'm just conscious of the about 15 more minutes, we'll be able to discuss. I'm really into brain stuff, so it's fascinating to me that how stress can even be generational. So we'll continue our conversation definitely. So think about stress. So the official definition of stress is the body's response to physical and mental demands. And so again, take your pencils and paper. I want you guys to, on a scale of 1 to 10, so this is our activity for today, stress gauge. So on a scale from 1, meaning rarely, to 10, meaning often, how often do you feel this way? So I'll give you the example for the first one. So do you find yourself walking, talking, or eating too fast? So you would just, on a scale of 1 to 10, so anywhere between 1 through 10, where would you rate yourself? Would you give yourself a 4, meaning like, I find myself, sometimes I do, or would you find yourself like a 9, meaning that's pretty much every day? So that you would think that, why would that be stress? We'll talk about it. So on a scale of 1 through 10, what would you rate yourself for walking, talking, or eating too fast? How about feeling that there is not enough time to get everything done? How often, on a scale of 1, meaning rarely, to 10, often, feel that there's not enough time to get things done? And you guys are in the chat here. All right, awesome. So I see 8s, I see 10s, I see a 6. Okay. I hear you on that one. So sometimes I feel it. I feel sometimes it's a 10 for me. So I have a lot of to-do lists. Feeling there's not enough time in the day to get things done. Feeling annoyed, frustrated, or anxious. You can share in the chat on a scale of 1 to 10. I see 10s. Oh my gosh, I see 10s, 9s, 5s. Okay. 10, 5, 6. Okay. Thanks for sharing, guys. I really appreciate it. Tamar, thank you. 9. Okay. And it's really helpful, I think, for you guys to see what other people are, how other people are gauging themselves. Not that you're comparing to another person, but just know that, oh, he's feeling the same way I am, or oh, she's a 10 and I'm a 10. I'm not way too off on that feeling. Good. How many of you guys would say you feel emotionally, meaning like worked out, meaning like you're just exhausted, just can't give anymore, like you feel like you're just like, you've just emotionally, you've just had it. 7s, 8s. Okay. Yeah, that physical, emotional, like I'm just worn out. All right. Next one is, how many of you would say you experience a racing mind that interferes with your ability to relax during the day, concentrate, or sleep at night? Where do you guys fall on that? So I hear 10s, 7s, 8s. See a lot of 7s and 8s. 10. Okay, Imani and Abigail, thank you so much for sharing. You guys are at a 10. Yeah, that racing mind, AC 9. So it interferes. Derek, thank you. 10. So that interferes with your ability to relax, focus, concentrate, and also at night. Sometimes I do have a racing mind at night, especially when I have a lot of things going on. It helps. Actually, I'll give you a little hint. I keep a pad of paper and a pencil by my bedside, and anything that comes and pops into my head, I just write down on my piece of paper, and then I look at it in the morning. So it's a little tip for that racing mind, especially at night. And it's also not helpful to listen or have exposed to blue light, like TV or iPads, especially before bed. So that's also another hint too. All right, next one is, feel that others expect too much of you. How often do you feel that stress? Is that a rarely? Is that a middle of the road? Is that often? 6, 7s, 2. Okay. 8. Okay. I see 8s. Good. Okay. Well, I'm glad you guys are sharing, and thank you so much again for sharing that, because it really is helpful to see how people are feeling. So here it is continued. How many of you feel a withdrawal from friends and family for more than a few days? So we're going to do this one first. How many of you feel that withdrawal? So 1 rarely to 10 often. I see 5s, 10s, 9s. Okay. How many of you feel the need to escape in some way, just to kind of get away from it all? Mentally, just, kind of go to another place? 8. Good. 8s, 10s. How many of you would say, on your stress gauge, that you have a change in appetite? You eat more, or are you eating much less? that also can relate to stress eating, or if, or you just don't have an appetite. Could go either way. 9s, 6s. Great. Thanks, guys, for sharing. And how many of you have that feeling that you are, quote, stretched too thin, or you have too many conflicting priorities? You have too much to do and not enough time to do it in. Or you have many responsibilities, but you have to choose between them, and you feel like you can't get it all done. All right, so we've got 9s and 5s and 7s. Okay, thank you again for sharing. So real quick, another little short video. I thought this was really cute, and these are good tips for managing stress.
We might think, I'm stressed, or this is stressing me out, but what do we actually mean? And what can we do about it? We could mean situations or events that put pressure on us, like things in our personal life, or how we're affected by the pandemic. Stress can also describe how we feel when we have demands placed on us that we find difficult to cope with. Stress isn't a mental health problem by itself, but it can impact our mental health. Whatever your experience is, here are some ways to look after your well-being and deal with pressure. What could help? Try to identify what triggers stress for you. Even if you can't avoid these situations, being prepared can help. This could include one-off events or issues that come up regularly. Organise your time based on your energy levels. Try not to do too much at once. Take breaks and take things slowly. And set yourself smaller, more manageable goals so that you can see your achievements. Practice saying how you feel. If people are making unreasonable demands of you, it's okay to tell them this and say no. Develop your interests and hobbies. They can be a great way to get away from everyday pressures. Shared hobbies can also be a good way to meet new people. Look after your physical health. Taking steps to look after your physical health can reduce stress, although this can sometimes be difficult. Try getting enough sleep and eating regular meals to make a difference. Find ways to relax. If you know that something relaxes you, like listening to music or being creative, try to set time aside to do this. Give yourself a break. Reward yourself for achievements, like finishing a piece of work or making a decision. You could take a walk, read a book, or simply reflect and be proud of what you've achieved. And forgive yourself if things didn't go to plan, or if you didn't do something you'd hoped for. Nobody's perfect, and putting extra pressure on yourself doesn't help. Build your support network. Whatever you're going through that's causing you stress, you don't have to cope with it alone. It could help to talk to students who might be feeling the same, or your tutor, student union, student support services, or GP.
All right. So I want to end for today just by kind of opening up the chat, or if you guys wanted to, just to talk for a second. So what are some of your personal, and I want to also stress positive, stress busting techniques? What do you guys do that really helps you to relax when you're, kind of in a stressful situation? And I love hearing different ideas. For some people that might not work for them. So, any idea is welcome. So Seem, you said coloring. That is awesome. I've seen those like adult coloring books, like where you have to fill in like all those little lines. That drives me a little crazy. I'm old school, so I go back to like the kiddie coloring books, like the princess ones, and I like love to trace the lines and kind of color in the middle, like I did when I was like 5 years old. That's very relaxing to me. I love that coloring. Adriana says listening to music. AC, punching my pillow. Miss Melissa says counting. That's also, that's also really good too. Counting either like backwards, like, 10, 9, 8, just kind of like, even if it's not out loud, just like in your head, or even counting like, 1 through 100, whatever it takes. So now you said music. Seems says running track. Awesome. Getting out and physical exercise is so important too. I know that if I just need like just a stress buster, like taking in just a breath of fresh air and walking outside around the block for, a minute, just helps me to kind of focus. Adriana, like you said, AC, I felt that too. Very good. So you guys have that in common. Elisa said listening to music. Hanaja says writing. Miss Melissa says breathing. Yes, because we sometimes we forget to breathe. Even the deep breathing, and I teach my like little ones, my younger kids this, but just like breathing in through the nose, almost like you're breathing in like a bouquet of flowers, and then breathing out.
99.
Breathing like blowing out candles on a birthday cake. Breathing in, and then breathing out. So simple. Sometimes we forget to breathe. Even though it's automatic, we don't do that good deep breathing. Excellent. Oh gosh, I have many more messages, but let's see. Gardening, watching movies, stretching, talking to my sister, talking to my boyfriend. I love all this. These are great. Stretching. Very good, guys. All right, so I am going to stop sharing.